Welcome to the Cyber Center for Biblical Studies. Hi, my name is Herb Bateman. Today we want to talk about the book of Hebrews. Scott Barger, pastor of the New Horizon Community Church, is here with us to help direct our discussion as we walk our way through some significant parts about the book of Hebrews. Scott?
All right, Herb, before we get any further, before we handle anything else, we got to ask the question that everybody's asking. Who wrote the book of Hebrews? You got to tell us.
You know, that is a real good question.
I know.
Greater minds than mine have attempted to answer that question. In my book entitled Charts on the Book of Hebrews, I do spend several charts looking at that issue, the various options that exist, when those various options came to play in history, what are the pros and cons for each view. Currently today, if you were to pick up recently published commentaries on the book of Hebrews, you'll find surprisingly that Apollos is the most favored option. The second most favored option is we just don't know. So we really don't know who wrote Hebrews. Personally, I like the possibility that Barnabas wrote Hebrews.
Sure.
There's some good traditional evidence for it, but there's weaknesses for that view, just like there's weaknesses for all the other views. But
Sure.
So for this video, we will say we do not know.
Okay.
Okay? So we don't know.
Do you think it matters?
I don't think it matters.
Okay.
It doesn't matter.
Okay. I mean, it would add maybe something in terms of establishing context, but at the end of the day,
Yes.
not too much?
Doesn't affect interpretation much at all.
Good, good.
Yeah.
All right. Well, that is good because we don't know.
Why we don't know.
So if you had to summarize in a sentence or two what the main point or the central theme of the letter to the Hebrews is, what would that be?
I think the whole point of the book of Hebrews is the encouragement to a group of believers to persevere in their believing faith in Jesus. So the main theme appears to me to be perseverance. Persevere in what you believe about Jesus. And if I were to extend that theme and make it and turn it into a sentence, I would say it this way. The reason believers are to persevere in their believing faith in Jesus is because Jesus is the one through whom God has spoken. And Jesus is the one through whom God has fulfilled his promises. And so when you think about the book of Hebrews, you do see Hebrews starting out with, in these last days, he has spoken through his Son. And as you work your way through the book of Hebrews, you see the author demonstrating over and over again how he has fulfilled covenant, particularly the new covenant promises. So that's the way I would like to summarize the book of Hebrews.
Sure.
Perseverance in your believing faith in Jesus, because Jesus is the one through whom he has spoken, and Jesus is the one through whom he has fulfilled his promises.
Sure. Now, in my opinion, I've always thought that one of the challenges of interpreting letters is that you're, for the most part, only hearing one side of a conversation, and so you have to do a lot of kind of detective work to figure out maybe what's going on the other side of this letter. So if you were to put your detective gear on and look at the book of Hebrews and try to deduce what it is that's going on in this group of believers, what is the occasion? What do you think is the situation surrounding or causing or motivating the writing of this letter?
Another good question. To look at the letter itself and just to see if there's anything in the letter itself that might give you some hints as to what might be the occasion. In chapter 10 of Hebrews, verses 32 to 34, we read this. But remember the former days when you endured a harsh conflict of suffering after you were enlightened. At times, you were publicly exposed to abuse and afflictions, and at other times, you came to share with others who were treated in that way. For in fact, you shared the sufferings of those in prison, and you accepted the confiscation of your belongings with joy. Why? Because you knew that you certainly had a better and lasting possession. So it appears that whatever is happening, whatever the period of time that this book is being written, there appears to be some persecution. Personally, I happen to think that it's written in the mid-60s, prior to the fall of the temple, but you're going to have pros and cons after the fall, maybe even earlier. But I'm of the perspective that this is a group of believers that are suffering persecution during the mid-60s. Could there be some Semitic agitations going on? Rome has traditionally taken things out on the Jewish people. We have Claudius expelling Jews. That's why Aquila and Priscilla are in Corinth when Paul gets there. They've been expelled. They have been the scapegoat for an excuse. These are Jewish Christians. Maybe there's something along those lines going on. Sure. We really don't know the exact historical situation. Perhaps it's because of the Judean war that's starting to emerge in Judea, and there's the association going on between Jews in Rome and what's happening in Judea. We really don't know. But there's persecution, and that seems to be the occasion and the reason for this exhortation. Don't give up on Jesus.
Right. So even though it's not maybe explicitly stated, we can kind of read between the lines and see that Barnabas wrote this letter to encourage some folks who are enduring persecution, right?
And Barnabas is known as being a man of encouragement. If we want to go along those routes, yes, we can.
But we don't know.
We don't know. That's right.
Okay.
We're just a perspective of ours. That's right. Yeah.
Sure.
Yes.
Sure. But it's our video, so
that's right.
Okay.
That's right.
There
So we can say what we want to some extent.
Sure. So besides the authorship of Hebrews, it seems that in one of my when you initially study Hebrews, you run into these really strong warning passages. They really stand out as kind of as being important in the letter. It seems that, of course, then they're going to get a lot of attention. Where are these warning passages, and what's your take on their purpose and how they serve kind of the intent of the letter?
Well, the warning passages, there are 5, and not everyone will break the warning passage out the same way. So depending on who you may read, different people break the warning passages out differently. So I happen to look at Hebrews 2, 1-4 as being one warning passage. And surprisingly, a lot of people do see that initial break. When it comes to the second warning passage, I see it breaking out in Hebrews chapter 3, verse 7 to 4:16. And then the third warning passage I look at, and I see that happening in chapter 5, 11 to 6:12. The other warning passage occurs in chapter 10, 19 to 39. And then the final one is in chapter 12, 14 to 29. And so I break those warning passages out in that manner. But depending on who you read, Guthrie may take it and break those verses out in smaller units. F.F. Bruce, in his commentary on the book of Hebrews, may have a different breaking out of those warning passages. I think I'm pretty close to Scott McKnight in the way he breaks out the warning passages, although we may differ slightly, but for the most part, I think we're pretty close. So depending on what commentator you use, they would be the 5 warning passages in the book of Hebrews. Everyone agrees there's 5 warning passages.
Sure.
And there is a real concern that this group of believers may fall away, may commit apostasy, may turn from Jesus.
Sure.
And throughout the whole book, I think there's something like 32 or 34 exhortations that the author is giving throughout the book, encouraging them or exhorting them, stand strong, don't turn.
Yeah, it does seem as though the warning passages get all of the play, and sometimes overlooked, and some preaching is the fact that interwoven within these warning passages is a lot of encouragement. I mean, there's no doubt that the author is trying to motivate the readers in a direction, and sometimes he uses warnings, sometimes exhortations, but they're both kind of present there, aren't they?
They are. And that's also important because, I mean, after each warning passage, there is an intensity about the warning, but then there's also a follow-up. But I'm sure of this about you, which comes alongside and giving them the benefit of doubt, or come on, we can do it, and come alongside. Never give up. Never surrender. We're going to make it through this. And that's what comes to my mind when I think about these passages. Don't give up. Don't surrender. But if you do give up and you do surrender, there are consequences.
Okay, Herb, from your perspective, what do you think the most significant aspect or element in the book of Hebrews is?
I would say the royal priesthood of Jesus. I greatly appreciate the fact when I look back in the Old Testament and I look at David and Solomon, their primary role was king, but they did do priestly functions, limited, but they intercede on behalf of people. They maintained, or they built and maintained the temple. David, of course, danced in the street with a priestly ephod as he was bringing the Ark of the Covenant into Jerusalem. So you see the king doing priestly functions, but he was limited as to what he could do because you had the Levitical priesthood in place. And of course, when a king crossed over and entered into that Levitical priesthood, they got punished, like Uzziah, in offering incense, and he got struck with leprosy. So there were limitations, but when it comes to Jesus, his royal priesthood has escalated. He's a greater Davidic king than all previous Davidic kings. There's one greater than Solomon in this book that's being presented. And so his priesthood, his function as royal priest has escalated and is far greater than that of any previous Davidic king, predominantly because Jesus is the one through whom God is fulfilling his promises to Abraham, David, and the new covenant. And so he's doing things that his life and ministry has replaced the need for that Levitical priesthood. And he's a priest who can empathize with my weaknesses because he's lived here as a man. And he knows the frailties of being human. And he understands obedience and the cost of being obedient and the pain that comes with obedience, and then the difficulties that come with just facing everyday life. He understands that. And so I go to him, and he knows my weaknesses. And he's interceding for me behind the veil in this heavenly picture of Jesus having entered in the veil, behind the veil. So I find that to be extremely significant and important as I think through the book of Hebrews. But you've preached through the book of Hebrews.
Sure.
I think it's been a couple years ago. But as you think through that series you did, what were you trying to get and help people see about the book of Hebrews?
Well, I think you can see in the words of this letter a concern for a readership who's obviously wavering in their faith, and struggling with, that's what doubt is, right? Your faith is wavering. You're not sure about things anymore. And I feel that whereas in modern day churches, we may not be struggling with the same kinds of cultural pressures, from outside, but there is still pressure, that things that come into our lives that cause us to doubt. And when you see the writer of Hebrews not only giving very passionate warnings, but also very passionate encouragements, not the least of which I think is this picture of Jesus being an empathizing high priest, a high priest who understands us, like you mentioned before. I just felt like that was very compelling, very motivating, and I wanted people to be able to lean on that. That we all have doubts, and some of us have very significant doubts, and we have a high priest who understands that, understand what it means to be doubting or uncertain, or having external pressures making life very uncomfortable, and that's, I think is a pretty motivating image to me.
Good. How about commentaries? What were one or two commentators that you greatly appreciated as you were preaching through and studying the book?
Well, most often I used O'Brien from the Pillar Commentary series. I used, NIV Application Commentary series, which is
George Guthrie.
That's right. I love the NIV Application Commentary series. It's just it's an easy kind of survey. The big points are mentioned, and a lot of attention obviously given to application. I thought that was good. I leaned heavily on the Word Biblical Commentary, which was well done.
William Lane,
yeah. So those three, and then on occasion others, depending on what the passage was. But I would say those would have been my three go-to commentaries.
Well, good. Well, thanks you, Scott. Thank you for joining us.
Sure.
And thank you for visiting with us as we discussed a little bit about the book of Hebrews, and as you continue to perhaps read book on your own and study the book on your own. Perhaps one of the three commentaries we mentioned will be of help to you. William Lane's commentary, Word Biblical Commentary on Hebrews, George Guthrie's NIV Application Commentary on Hebrews, and O'Brien's commentary on the book of Hebrews in the Pillars Commentary series, which I believe is the best of all the commentaries I've ever read on the book of Hebrews. But in the meantime, thank you for joining us, and I trust you will have a great day. Until next time.